Hi, we're Tom and Catherine Anderson, David's parents. So we've known him for quite some time.
As many of you know, when I first came to Emmanuel, David was in kindergarten, actually with my daughter Kara. And I watched him grow up there as his family was involved in leadership at the church. He went through the youth group, was in leadership there, went off to Azusa, worked at Forest Home in leadership. David, I think I must have written 5 or more recommendation letters for you, and in spite of that, they all let you in.
I've known David since I interviewed his family for membership at Emmanuel Church. He was a very cute toddler at that time.
Well, we've always said that Emmanuel raised all 3 of our kids, and you guys did a great job because they turned out great. I have a million memories of David at Emmanuel. I can picture him almost in any room of the church, at any age. And I have all your faces too, people who are Sunday school teachers, his vacation Bible school teachers, youth group leaders, camp counselors at Forest Home. I mean, I could go on and on and on.
I first met David 25 years ago when we visited Emmanuel while we were looking for churches. And there had been a luncheon after the service to honor someone who was retiring. And the Anderson family invited us to share their blanket. And their hospitality and warmth was part of the reason why we came back to Emmanuel.
David he always wanted to go. He was always happy to go to church. He loved going to church. Lots of kids at different times of their life say, I don't want to go, or it's boring. He always wanted to be there. So I think that's remarkable.
David was a young teenager, I don't know how old, but I remember him having the bleached blonde spiky hair that was really popular with the teens and kids in those days.
Later, he accompanied my sister, Dee Dee, on an impact trip to Kenya, and she has many stories from that time.
Probably the first memory I have of you was in your high school years. You were walking around the campus with all your friends. I didn't really know you at that point, but I just remember you were all so incredibly tall, and you were all walking into the narthex, and I thought you were all going to hit your heads on the top of the door jamb.
I remember David saying towards the end of high school that he was so proud of the fact that he read not one single complete book and graduated high school with good grades to get into college. Who would have thunk that he'd go on to get 2 master's degrees and 1 in English literature? He's now probably read more books than I'll read in 3 lifetimes.
And I remember David Anderson walking in to the office with adorable little Matthew on his shoulder, tiny baby. David had a really long beard, really long hair. He was in flip-flops and sweats, and he was just shooting the breeze with people in there. I think Lisa Wilcox was still there. And I remember Stuart coming out of the office and them talking, and I went back to the conference room. And it was shortly thereafter, in talking with Stuart, he said, I think we found our new youth director.
You just graduated from your master's degree program, and by God's grace, there was a place open at Emmanuel, and it was, in fact, in God's timing for you and for us. As you began to explore what it meant to be called into the ministry of the Word and Sacrament, we had a lot of conversations around what it meant to be in the church and what it meant to be in leadership. And I was excited for you as you decided to go on to seminary, and you had a full-time workload there at the seminary, a full-time job at Emmanuel, and a full-time expanding family. And I was so impressed how you handled that with such grace. And I'm excited now for you in this step that you're taking to become the head of staff at Emmanuel Church.
And over the years, David has been the youth minister for my kids.
Because I've known David for a long time, ever since he showed up as youth pastor. All my kids were in high school. I was going on mission trips into downtown LA with him, with Sky. That will lead to a funny story in just a few minutes.
So I later came to know you when you were the youth ministry pastor, and I really appreciate how you took both my daughters under your wing, how you looked at them as individuals, not just as part of the flock. And I remember in particular when you reached out to me regarding one of my daughters and really felt it was important for her to be engaged and get engaged and be involved, that it would be important for her in the long term. So that was really the first pastoral discussion we had together.
David, the youth director 12 years ago, was a little bit different than David, the pastor now.
The story that I wanted to share was actually going all the way back to the beginning when David was youth pastor and Sky was in the high school group, and we went downtown LA for a weekend mission trip just to get a sense of what was going on down there. And if anyone knows Sky, Caroline's my youngest son, you know, he's just as sweet as can be, but he's not always paying attention to what's going on around him. And the other thing is he just sleeps like a log. So we were getting ready to go to bed, and most of the high school kids are chatting it up. This guy's not that interested in that. He just wants to go to sleep. So he does before anybody else. And then as we're looking for our sleeping bags, it turns out that Sky absent-mindedly has crawled into David's bag, which leaves it leaves David the choice of either waking my son up, which is what certainly 99 out of 100 people would do, rather than crawling into Sky's bag. And think about it, you know, a 17-year-old high school kid takes a shower once a month. David chose to let him sleep in his bag, crawled into Sky's bag, and did it with, I mean, it was the ultimate act of courage. I think it's one of the most memorable things I've ever seen any youth pastor do as an act of courage and as of love. That set the tone for many of our interactions after that.
David is good at making you feel, or enabling you to feel like you can do anything, and that there's hope.
And growing up at Emmanuel my whole life, I've spent a lot of time with David, going on camps and retreats and mission trips over the years, and there's a lot of silly, wacky David stories I could tell. But today I'm going to tell a more serious one. The summer after my freshman year of high school, we went to Forest Home like we normally do with our students. And at the time, I was really struggling with who I was, my identity, and really hated myself and questioned why God made me the way that he did. And I remember I received a note from David, and the note said, "I think you're great, and I know that one day you will too." And this is something that has stuck with me to this day, and I'm very grateful that I'm in a place finally where I do believe that to be true. And what I love about David is he not only supported me in that season when I was a high school student and struggling through a lot of different things in my life, but he's really walked with me until this day and has modeled what it looks like to be like Jesus, not only talk about it on Sunday morning, but he really models day in and day out what it looks like to live a sacrificial life that emulates Jesus. And for that, I'm grateful, and I know that we're all grateful for David.
I don't think any of my David stories are appropriate. Okay.
I think David is truly a great team player. In my company, we talk about the qualities of being a great team player as being humble, being hungry, having a strong work ethic, and having a sense of being smart about people, good emotional intelligence. And I would really give David high marks, actually, on all three of those.
A story I think many people probably don't know. One night when David and I worked together with the students, we had a couple on campus just sort of wandering, an older, like an adult couple. And they were poking their head in, and David chatted with them, and he just had told the group, he's like, "Hey guys, I'll be back in a bit." or he asked me or something like that. And so he left, came back probably half an hour or so, and didn't mention anything about it. And I had to dig later for him to finally admit that he had he'd put the couple up in a hotel room. They were they're in need, and he saw the need, and he just drove them over and put them up for a night, or I don't even know how long. And that is a picture, I think, of how David's faith is in action a lot. It's he's not loud about it. He just sort of puts his head down and is faithful, and has no concern for if someone sees it or not. He probably prefers no one sees it. But that's been a typical action as I've gotten to know Dave and his faith for the past dozen years or so.
More recently, I have known him as an associate pastor.
And I've really been so impressed in watching him grow into the pastoral role that he has right now.
David's authenticity, his ease of conversation, his theology, his sense of humor, pretty dry.
I have to admit, I never dreamed that we would have this day where he would be a pastor of the church he grew up in. But God really works in amazing ways.
Wise and compassionate are two things that come to mind. There have been many times when David has said something in a meeting or just in a service where I have wondered, how is somebody this young so wise? And I have just come to appreciate that wisdom that he has and his ability to listen to others and see other perspectives.
I just wanted to share this about David. He tries stuff, and when it affects him, he shares that, and it affects others. One of the things that really struck me, a sermon that he gave, I think last year it was, where he shared his change of focus. He decided to focus on Christians who were thoughtful, disadvantaged Christians who wrote. And he read 3 books showing their perspective on things. I wouldn't have gotten this if David hadn't mentioned it. And he talked about it, and it's been a theme for a number of studies since that time. So thanks, Dave. I really appreciate that. And now that I get to work with you on session, what I'm seeing is that same kind of pastoral care and your collaborative style. One thing I'll say about you, David, is I really appreciate how you are so patient in making decisions and how you seek out feedback from your others who've been at the church for a long time, others who are on session, and you really share the power of the leadership and the leadership for the church. So thank you for that.
And one of the things that I really appreciate about David is his willingness and ability to ask really hard questions, and the underlying faith that's there in being able to ask the questions and knowing that it's okay to do that, which to me implies a real strong sense of faith underneath that.
David is very good at a number of things, but I think my favorite thing that he is good at is making chicken wings.
What has been really remarkable for us to see in these last few years, as David also steps into a pastor role for his family and for his neighbors. So we feel so, we're very proud of him and very grateful to Emmanuel for wanting him to be your pastor. Thank you. Thanks.
I never thought at the time that David Anderson would be our head pastor, but boy, I'm sure glad he is.
We are really looking forward to you being our pastor at Emmanuel Presbyterian Church.
I have nothing but love and admiration and respect for you, David, and I'm so delighted that you are a designated pastor. The fact that it was a unanimous vote doesn't surprise me at all, and we're just thrilled to have you, so thank you.
I'm thrilled that he's here. And David, I am glad you're my pastor.
Congrats, Dave. I'm proud of you, and I'm happy for our church. I feel honored to be a member of a church that you're pastoring. Love you, man.
I'm reminded of the words of Jesus, that when he said, if I'm lifted up, I will draw all people to myself. And so I pray for you that in your own life, you will make Christ central in the life of the church and in the life of your family with Becky and all the kids, that you will lift Christ up, make him central there. Ruth and I are just so delighted for you and for Emmanuel, and we offer God's blessing and continue to pray for you all. God bless you, brother. Love you. Take care.
Hey, just wanted to add something. We have lots of David stories, and most of them I don't think he would want us to share. But if you're ever doing a David roast, please call us.